was an interesting person to work with. He could be very stubborn and awkward, but he was very knowledgeable.
I never met him. I don't think I did, and but he's had such a big impact on it because it was his baby, and a lot of the recipes that are hanging around, the beer names, they're all his.
And he was a real master brewer. There's not many people who are master brewers, but he was one. I think he'd done 7,700 brews in his career, so that's a lot of beer. I've never added up how many pints it is, but it's an awful lot. I think when he started brewing, he contacted HMRC to get a form to fill in, because when you brew you pay duty on the beer. So if you produce something with alcohol in it, you have to pay duty on it. And they didn't even have a form. And at the time there was only 80 breweries in England. There's about 3,000 breweries now. So it was a long time ago, 43 years ago, I think. Yeah, the marketplace is extremely tough, and people sometimes, because the marketplace is tough, it's a race to the bottom on price. So we're competing against people who are virtually giving it away. And the only way you can compete really is by the quality of what you produce. So if you've got a good quality product, you hope that people will pay the price for it.
Brewing is basically 4 ingredients. You've got water, malt, hops and yeast, and how those interact and what levels you choose of them and what temperatures you do determines the final product that you're after.
We get all our malt from a malt company in Suffolk called Crisp Malt. The malt is barley, which is grown in the field, it's harvested, and then it's taken to a maltings where they get it at the right temperature and with the right amount of moisture and trick the malt into thinking that it's been planted and is ready to start growing. And as soon as it grows, the energy that's stored inside that grain turns to a starch so that the plant can use it as an energy source. We get all our hops from hop factors in Worcestershire, Farrams. The majority of their hops are grown in Worcestershire and Herefordshire. We use our own house yeast, which we reuse, and the water is from the tap.
So you've got those 4 ingredients, and then you've got different stages of the process. So we're taking malted grains, so that's grains that have had the germination started and then stopped by kilning, and that locks in all the sugars, and we're basically extracting the sugars by the next stage, which is mashing, which is adding hot water, or in brewing we call it liquor. So adding hot to that mash, extracting the sugars, because all the sugars will get released out through enzymatic action, so there's different enzymes that are going to release different sugars at different temperatures. The next thing is getting the sugars and the juice, the wort out of the mash into the copper, which is basically a big vessel where we boil up that wort that we've collected. We'll be sparging through, which basically is spraying water on the top of the grain, which will wash out those sugars in there and give us a bit more volume in the copper. We'll be adding hops at the beginning, which add bitterness, and towards the end of the boil, which is an hour, we'll be adding some more, and that's aroma and flavour. After that, we'll leave it to stand for a little bit in the hops, and then we'll draw off that wort and rapidly cool it through a plate heat exchanger, so we can take it into the fermenting vessel, the fermenter, and we'll be oxygenating that and adding yeast in there as well. The yeast is a massive flavour component, and with the ales it's a top cropping yeast, so it'll ferment from the top. So you'll see it all bubbly on top, and it kicks out carbon dioxide, and during that process it'll kick out alcohol as well, as it eats the sugars that we've given it. So it's got nice maltose to munch on, bit of oxygen to get it going, and then it'll just get to work replicating, eating those sugars, kicking out alcohol and bringing the levels of sugar down. But every single part of the process, whether it's temperature of the mash, temperature of the fermentation, length of boil, amount of hops, variety of hops, types of malt, or everything is it's a bit like open for interpretation. So you can, depending on what kind of beer you want at the end and what flavours you want and what profile you want at the end, all those things can be changed. And to do a consistent, like core range beer, for example, you're trying to keep those things the same every single time, based around those products. So yeah, that's the basic thing for the brewing part of it. Once it's had its fermentation, we'll cool it, put it into cask, and then a really important part of the process is it stays in the cask for another week and it does a secondary fermentation because there's still a little bit of yeast in there, a little bit of oxygen, and that'll give the cask its sort of life and it'll help melt those flavours together a bit. So conditioning time before it then gets delivered to the pub, and hopefully they look after it and it comes through into a nice clean glass, through nice clean lines, and it is fantastic and delicious.
So yeah, once we've finished with that grain, we've got no further use for it. But any waste companies charge you on weight, and so we'll be looking at about a tonne of waste every time. So we've got a local farmer in Middleton who comes and collects that grain. It's all registered with the council through their services, so it's full traceability. But he'll come and take our grain away, and he feeds it to his beef, cattle and sheep. Okay, so we're sitting in a room that used to be lots of offices, and downstairs used to be 2 rooms of offices. And now we've got one person with a computer that can do all the work that was done by people, by numerous people. So we've got this empty space that we needed to use as a resource. Tony had collected a lot of brewery memorabilia. We're going to sort of decorate the bars with that, and that'll be a big talking point for people. It's nice for me. I like the fact that I'm working in an industry that's got a lot of history to it. You know, beer's been made in the similar way to the way we make it, you know, for 500, 600, 700 years in this country, and to be part of that continuing tradition of making cask ale is kind of a uniquely British kind of thing, which is quite a fun thing to think about at the end of the day when you think about your job.
I guess the idea for the brewery tap was, I suppose the 3 of us, myself and my 2 daughters, Bex and Lucy, and we've always, since we first ever visited the brewery, which was probably about 10 years ago, we always thought it'd be marvellous to have a tap here.
I don't think there were any existing plans. At that time, there were a lot more pubs. I mean, I think there's on average 3 pubs closing down every week at the moment, because that's not where people want to be, you know. It's been taxed heavily, so it's got relatively more expensive in relation to people's income. So we have to look how those people are drinking and when they're drinking. They're drinking at home, drinking at weekends. So that's why we've gone to the bottling, really, to try and even up the loss of pubs with getting a new market somewhere. It's something that so many breweries do now, so that you get immediate feedback on your beer. You know, you're selling your beer, so you've got another income stream. The money's coming straight to us, but you've also got instant feedback on the beers that people like. And then we've got a room here that can be used for meetings, bigger gatherings, and two rooms downstairs that can be used as rooms to the bar. So yeah, hopefully we'll have a bar here. It'll be a community resource. People can rent this room and they can do Pilates, yoga, or they can just have their club meetings here or whatever they want to do, and there's a bar downstairs for them. So hopefully we'll act as a bit of a community hub as well, a bit of community cohesion. So yeah, I think I'm looking forward to it. It's all positive.